Well, good morning. One of my friends passed away yesterday, and the reason why I'm sharing on my Seminole War blog is pretty much because of him is the reason why I'm here. I don't know if I'd ever have gotten into the Seminole War reenacting in history and culture if it wasn't for Rick. Rick Obermeyer passed away June 13th, I believe, in the evening. Um, he was 76 years old. I'd known him about 45 years. Uh, Sherwood Frederick Obermeyer Jr. lived in Orlando most of his life, went to Florida State University, and at Florida State, he participated in the Flying High Circus, but a little bit about that more. But uh, I got into, of course, in the Order of the Arrow and Boy Scouts and met Rick through that. And he got me involved in the patch trading and then the Seminole War history. So, anyway, I've pulled this image off Facebook. There's not very many photographs of Rick. He was not the kind who put a lot of praise and accolades to himself, although he's well deserving. These are some of the accomplishments, patches that he designed and did for Tipasaw Lodge and some of the Air Lodges. He also wrote the history of the Order of the Arrow, and that's a picture of him up top there in the center. One of the few pictures of him I remember as mostly as a black haired guy, and the last few years it's been all gray hair. Um, and another book he's famous for is that did the 19th century Seminole men's clothing back in 1991. Now, Rick, he would never go halfway. He would want to go full blown involved in something. So when Rick would get involved and start research, he would leave no stone unturned. So over the years, he got into the Seminole history and culture, mainly because at the time there was not a lot written about it. He wanted to research and investigate something that at the time we didn't have a lot of information on or sources on. So he started doing that, and partly because the Order of the Arrow would, in the ceremonies, would dress in Native American garb, and we wanted to do local garb, not the generic Plains garb. So Rick started investigating the Seminole clothing from, the 19th century up to modern times. And he would travel to museums all over the country. He went to the Denver Art Museum, had a leather coat of Osceola, which I think the Seminole tribe now has. He went to the Smithsonian and met with Bill Sturdivant, a famous ethnologist and anthropologist in the Smithsonian, who actually did his dissertation on the Josie Billy back in the 1950s, which I have a copy. And so Rick looked at some of the Seminole clothing in the vaults of the Smithsonian, which you have to arrange an appointment because not only is it in a room, they have to find the key of the room, and then it's in a cabinet. They have to find the key to the cabinet and into the box that it's locked in. So it's a very complicated process, and that's why they have to arrange appointments. And out of that, Rick Obermeyer and also Pete Thompson and a few of our guys we knew in the order there, mainly Rick, put together the Seminole Men's Clothing book. And it became the guide for everyone doing the correct clothing for the historical reenactments. And now it is on nativetech.org. He uh, gave the rights over to the website to put it all on there. People said, well, why don't you do a second edition? He said, well, I haven't really uh, found enough material to make a new one, but on a website, you can keep adding more pictures and more information. It's easier to do that. Back in 1997, when I went to Oklahoma, went to the Seminole Nation Festival, and some of the ladies there had photocopied copies of Rick's book here that they were using to make finger weaving or or moccasins. And Rick was very impressed with that, and very glad to hear that. Rick was not doing it for money, he was doing it to assist people. And that was the way Rick operated. Here Rick is about 2011. He did at the Scout Functions order there, he did demonstrations on Seminole cooking, pumpkin fry bread. It looks like here he's cutting up heart of palm or swamp cabbage, as we know. And it looks like there's a pot of sofki on the other end of the table. But Rick really enjoyed cooking as well. We collected cookbooks on Native American cooking. And another thing Rick I knew him for was the patch trading. And he had a real good ethic on patch trading. And here he is with some of the patch trains. This says 2011 on the photo. Now, Rick would be a very common sense, very down to earth, and very practical type of guy. When I was working on the Chippewa Lodge newsletter about 1983 or 84, I had Rick proofread it, and he said uh, about the upcoming lodge weekend, Rick told me, well, you didn't put down for the guys to bring sleeping bags. I said, well, why would I do that? Rick said, if you don't put that down, there'll be a bunch of guys showing up saying, well, the information on the weekend didn't tell me to bring sleeping bags, so I didn't bring a sleeping bag. So that was Rick was not so much directing, but helping other people steer them in the right direction, and making them think of all the details and all the information. Rick was also a member of Mensa organization, which is like the organization of people with the top 10% IQ. And he he would actually get a newsletter for that. And that was pretty interesting reading when he got one of those in the mail. And so he was intelligent in everything he did, very detail oriented, made you think about what you're doing there. He's, not so much that he would actually do the work, but he would say, well, have you thought of this? And it would be a reminder and said, no, I didn't think of that. So, I better go ahead and do that, like the sleeping bags. And that was his leadership style. He was mentor to thousands of scouts and reenactors and people all over Florida and the Southeast. He earned the Distinguished Service Award in the Order of the Arrow, one of the first people to earn that award. Back in the 1970s, he is a lodge, or he was a section advisor to the Florida lodges in the Order of the Arrow. And so just about every weekend, he would drive to some Florida Order of the Arrow function at some scout camp. He'd always get somebody to carpool with him. And a few times I'd carpooled with him and took him up to reenactments. And that's how he got me started in the Seminole War history and reenactment. He gave me a call, said, hey, Chris, tomorrow they're doing a reenactment at Dade Battlefield. I said, oh, what's that? This was 1985, the 150th anniversary of the battle, and the first full-blown reenactment they had at the site. So Rick and I went up there and had a great time. And I saw several people I knew who were involved in the reenactments. And I thought, well, if they're involved in that, I can do that too. So I got involved. And much like Rick, I have to research everything. Well, the past few years, one thing I didn't know, before that, Rick was pretty much an expert on Seminole clothing throughout history, textile. This is one of the Seminole jackets he got. It's a little bright or unusual color. It says green, but I guess you might say that's aqua or something. Not only will you find some interesting Seminole jackets or clothing, he would find kind of some unusual examples. Like he found one that was all silk and had real tiny bands of patchwork, about 6 bands of patchwork. And so he was good hunting down unusual examples like that. And before he passed away in the last couple of years, he took a large part of that collection and donated it to the FSU anthropology department. And also he had a postcard collection of postcards of Seminole Indians, thousands of postcards. And he donated that to the Florida archives. So, you know, so it can not only uh, be accessible, but can be enjoyed by all because the state archives will digitize what they don't already have on the Florida Memory website. So you'll be able to see those postcards as well. So that's pretty cool. And one thing I didn't know is that Rick came up to my place and would stayed at my place a couple times, and he was alumni of the FSU circus. In fact, the FSU circus started the same year that he was born. And listening to some of the obits online about him, Rick would go almost every year they could to the circus. He missed a couple years, the last few years. One was um, because of COVID when they didn't have the circus, and then I think he was probably in the hospital with his illness. Um, Came up to my place in 2022, stayed at my place for a couple weeks, and then this past April he came up again. He didn't stay in my place, but he was not in great health, so a friend of ours drove Rick and chauffeured him all around, and they stayed in a hotel, which was probably better than staying in my place. But Rick walked the slack wire in the FSU Flying High Circus. And what I didn't know, which I just heard, is that he got injured at one point, and in the FSU circus, you either graduate, don't go FSU anymore, or you get injured and can't participate in the circus there. Well, when Rick got injured, he didn't want to leave the circus, so he came up with being a clown. So he became a clown, which they did not have at the time. They didn't have clowns. And it's still a tradition that the circus does today that, does some entertaining between the acts and all that. So it's something he developed himself and came up with that, that everybody remembers. And when he go to the reunions, he used to come with home videos of everyone, and they really enjoy that. But, he's known for the different patches. And few things. I'm wearing a T-shirt from the FSU Flying High Circus that that I brought that I bought last April when Rick came down. Here's some of the patches. Here's one of our lodge flaps, Tippsaw Lodge, and I'd never worn this or used it, but there's there's some buttons or something in here. I don't know if that's a no, I don't know if that's a some type of noise maker device. I don't know. I never, there's something in there. There's something in the back. I'm not sure what that is. If anybody knows what it is, let me know. I've never noticed that before because it's been sitting on the shelf for about 10 years. And here's another patch I got at the last Tippsaw function I went to in 2015, kind of a composite patch. Many of these patch designs were ones that Rick actually came up with. There's some that were ideas of others that he dressed up as patch designs. And I know which ones, but yeah. so, so maybe some of you know what I mean too. But he was a caring individual. He never did anything for profit. He was unabashedly sharing to everyone he'd meet, teaching them about history, the cooking, the Seminole clothing history, the culture, the scouting, and the patches. Whatever he do, he would give of his time and effort. without asking of anything in return. There. He had a few other little hobbies, like he had a little shoebox, shadow box, something like a display where he get these little miniature figurines. Like he had a shoebox that had like a wizard's room or something, and had all these miniature objects. So he collected like miniature tables and chairs and statues. He had another shadow box that was like a Italian Renaissance art museum with all these miniature objects in it. Uh, he was brilliant and interested in everything, and I'll certainly miss him along with thousands of other people that he touched the life of. So, you know, so long, Rick. Thanks for the years of mentoring, the way you affected my life and thousands of others. And dadgummit, we'll miss you. But, the way you affected us, we'll remember that forever. And so I just wanted to let everyone know about one of my favorite people. Thank you.